Hello, Podsmashers of the internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-bit Podsmash, hash 80-bit Podsmash,
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. We are your hosts.
Penguin and Termite. I'm Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right.
Over a beer.
Yeah, and tonight we are talking about backwards compatibility, that selling point, the topic of discussion, that debate that rages on as we enter a new console generation. You've heard us talk about backwards compatibility a lot and question whether or not consoles are going to have it. For those of you who already know the ins and outs of backwards compatibility, this episode's probably going to be a very basic rundown of it, but we'll talk about some. We'll have some discussion as well, so it's worth sticking around to hear us.
It's a very relevant topic with the PlayStation 5 and its speculative nature of backwards compatibility. I wrote a giant dissertation on our website. It's a blog post, but it's a lot about the history of backwards compatibility specifically to PlayStation. But anyway, the hype is real with the new consoles coming, so we thought this topic would be relevant.
Yeah, it's good. It's good too because Xbox has confirmed certain things about backwards compatibility, so we can talk through those as well and why it's important. So we are Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. Tonight, we again are social distancing, and so we are recording in the comforts of our own homes and drinking drinks separately. But what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking Blue Mountains Bourbon Barrel Aged Dark Hollow Imperial Stout. What are you drinking?
That's good. That's a good one. I am drinking.
It is good.
I'm actually drinking wine tonight. Me and my wife cracked open a bottle of Dancing Flame, and neither of us really liked it. So I'm drinking it because we had some left over. It is a red blend, and I'll talk about what's on the back. It is from the Valle Central in Chile. It is a red blend of 70% Cabernet Sauvignon and 20% Carmenere. I've never heard of that before. Sorry, wine lovers, I butchered that. And then 10% Syrah. Syrah. It is a dry taste. It is full-bodied style. It is bursting with blackberry and cherry flavors with a single hint of spice and mocha on the finish. It pairs well with grilled meats and vegetables, pasta with red sauce, hard cheeses, or simply on its own, which is how I'm having it. And best served when at room temperature, it is at room temperature because it's been sitting out on the counter all day.
Mm-hmm.
So
you don't chew red wine usually.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't have a big good palate for wines. So to me, it has a little bit of like a sour taste, which is the fruity. It is very dry. I like my white red wine sweet, and I learned that recently actually. Dry, when talking about wine, is or talking about alcohol in general. Dry is actually the opposite of sweet, not wet.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I've been using it wrong. There is a term for how the feeling of it pulling moisture out of your mouth. And I'm blanking on it right now. It's a word that starts with an A.
Acidity?
No, it's not acidity.
That's related to bitterness.
Astringent. It's astringence or whatever is that feeling of like drying out your mouth. But no, dry just means not sweet. So water is technically a dry drink, which is kind of funny to say. Water is dry.
It is dry because there's no alcohol in it.
Well, but there's no... I do what you mean. So it's actually water is dry for like many reasons.
Yep.
That's fun. Anyways, so that's, as far as I can definitely tell, it's not sweet, and it is very, it's got a little bit of a sour taste to it, and it is wine. It tastes like wine to me. It tastes red.
All right. Do you know what is special about the Bourbon Barrel Aged Dark Hollow?
What is special about it?
That was the first beer you and I had together at Cap Ale House.
Right. Very cute.
On.
That's a
How about
cute
that?
Thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there's some verbiage on the bottle. I'll read. Dark Hollow, the mystery of great beer, challenges the spirit of adventure in all who seek a higher level to this ancient brew. Dark Hollow blends the miracle of two crafts, brewing and distillation, to create a work greater than the sum of its parts. Our Imperial Stout has been aged in charred American oak bourbon barrels, patiently breathing in and out the wood, gaining complexity, depth, and character.
That is a very 80-bit Podsmash description. It's like our origin story wrapped up in one. Start an adventure together. We started a podcast. Higher level. Come on,
Leveling
like gaming. It's a very, that's good. It's a good origin story.
Oh, it's very good.
Well, I'm jealous. I wish I could be drinking it. That sounds really good.
Super boozy. It's just full-bodied. It's thick, and it's not too sweet. And it has that malt. It's just, Yep, it's good stuff.
Good stuff. So we like to start the show with a segment where we just talk about news, things happening, updates with the gaming world and the gaming industry. And so, we have a couple things to share that are not coronavirus related. So we're going to share them.
Much to our surprise, Square Enix had some tweets this morning when I woke up, and I'm going to read the one that's pertinent to us. It's pretty short, but they did that whole screen capture so they can get past the character limit. So here's what Square Enix through Final Fantasy VII's Twitter account said. Quote, "The Final Fantasy VII Remake team have worked extremely hard to make this game, and we are incredibly proud of what you are about to play. Our biggest motivator during the development was that so many of you were willing us on. That's a thing.
That's a thing.
And we felt your enthusiasm and passion every step of the way. We had some hard decisions to make during the final few weeks before the launch due to the disruption and to distribution channels caused by the spread of the COVID-19 virus. These unique circumstances have made it very difficult to align timing of our global shipping. Our highest priority is that all of you, including those who live in countries currently facing the biggest disruption, can play the game at launch. So, we made the decision to ship the game far earlier than usual to Europe and Australia. As a result, there's a greater chance that some of you in these regions will now get a copy of the game prior to the worldwide release of April 10th. For other Western regions, including the Americas, copies will be shipped this week, and we feel optimistic that most of you will receive the game for launch day. However, due to the challenging situation, we cannot provide delivery dates for each country and each retailer." There's a second page that pretty much, I'm not going to read that one, but they're asking about spoilers. So be conscious of the internet and try to allow other players to experience the game on their own. So that was pretty nice of them to say. But so the context for me, I received an email update from Amazon 2 weeks ago that scrapped the April 10 date. That's when it would be shipped. They didn't know they would update me later. So I freaked out, and I immediately went to Best Buy and pre-ordered another copy because they said April 10th still. Then it came out later that Amazon was prioritizing household goods during the coronavirus, which I totally support and understand. That's great. No one needs video games. I mean, we want video games when we're in quarantine, but other household needs definitely outweigh frivolous things. So I understand. And I was like, well, crap. Then I got another email update saying April 10th is when you'll receive Final Fantasy VII Remake. And then Square Enix tweets that all of the game's physical copies will be in short supply and possibly delayed. That was 3 weeks ago. Then we get this, that people are actually getting it early, and they're optimistic that most will happen. So what do you think about all this?
We had a conversation about it earlier today. I'm very, very hopeful that, again, there seemed to be some indication that they seem to be working actively with distributors, with retailers, and saying, hey, it's very important to us that these pre-orders get there on time. So it makes me hopeful. I can't say that I'm necessarily optimistic, but I'm really just hoping that my copy arrives on time, at the very least on time. Because I ordered mine through Amazon using I got a discount on it. I got the $10 discount or whatever when it was on sale in June of last year.
Yep.
I also used Amazon credit, so I had put the pre-order in, and then when Christmas came around and I got games that were duplicates, I sold those back to Amazon and had credit that I used to fully cover my copy. So my copy of Final Fantasy is coming without any cost to me, which is great, and I'm super excited. It's effectively a Christmas present now. That said, I'm not going to go back out. You know what I mean? I want to use that credit for that, and I'm not willing to give that up. So that means I have to wait. So I'm choosing, I should say. I don't have to. It means I'm choosing to wait for it. And I'm just hoping it's not delayed. So that's kind of where I stand in regards to the actions I'm going to take on it. I'm not you going to hedge. I'm not going to hedge my bets like you are. So then stepping back from my, hopeful side and just talking about it analytically speaking, I still think that there's some reason to be optimistic to get your copy on time. Again, like I said, it seemed like they went from saying, hey, we expect this to be delayed physical copies to
Mm-hmm.
we believe that the majority of you will get it on time. That, and then they also said something like, we can't go into details about specific retailers in specific regions, but we really do believe that most of you will get your copies. So that, if they're specifically talking about retailers and regions, that means that they have talked to retailers. So I imagine they've talked to Amazon. One way I could see it working out is Amazon might, basically like bypass the warehouses altogether and just like get the orders in and then load the pre-orders directly onto trucks to have them shipped and only accept copies for the pre-orders. You know what I mean? Like they might say, they might have worked out where Square Enix is like, can we just give you the ones that people have ordered? And then anybody who wants to buy it after the game comes out, they're kind of in, tough luck. Like you're not going to get it for a while. You should get it from a different retailer. So that might be a way that they're doing it, is the only thing I can think of. But other than that, Amazon's track record has been kind of crappy during this whole thing. So that ultimately is where my skepticism begins to come out and say, yeah, maybe I'll just, maybe I'll get the Control DLC to tide me over, or maybe I'll play Shadow of the Colossus to tide me over or something, something to tide me over until I get the game. And hopefully it's not delayed too much.
Yeah, Amazon is the one retailer I have the least amount of faith in getting this game out on time. And it's funny you mentioned regions. I didn't really think about this. There are regions of the country that are more affected by the coronavirus, and Amazon's shipping priorities are not going to be gaming leaning in those areas for sure. I also don't think the logistics required to do what you just said about shipping directly to customers, skipping warehouses, prioritizing pre-orders, like that requires a lot of overhead. And I don't think Amazon has that for games. Like I think their games just go through the same system as coffee filters and batteries or cleaners and toilet paper. Like it's just mass ordered. It's stocked on shelves. It goes out on this date. They have computers that govern everything. Robots go grab it and orders are fulfilled. And there's just a hands-off kind of mass everything approach to it, unlike a specialized retailer like GameStop that would actually like go after Square Enix and say, hey, I want these copies for these pre-orders in these regions at this date and breaking street date. So that's like, I agree. If there was people doing that at Amazon, I just never have seen any proof that that's how Amazon works, especially with how pre-orders for games in Amazon are always late. Even when there's not a coronavirus. They didn't used
to be, and that's what's crazy. Yeah, and that's what's got me also skeptical. Is they didn't used to be, which is crazy. I never had a problem getting Amazon games on time.
Yeah.
Until they started doing their own shipping. Until you started seeing those. Around the time you started seeing those Prime trucks.
Oh, yeah.
It was around the time. Because when they just used to do it through USPS and or FedEx, depending on the type of item. But games, to me, always came through the post office. There was never a problem. I would always be able to just, if I really wanted the game like immediately, I would just call the post office and have them hold my mail, and then I would drive down there and get it. If I was willing to wait, it would still always arrive before 8 o'clock that day. So but it wasn't until they started doing their own shipping that I started having.
That's ironic because the whole point of doing their own shipping was to do the 1 day shipping to make it faster.
Yep.
And so they didn't rely on services like UPS or the postal service.
It's very, very ironic. I did want to talk also about the other flip side in regards to how is this going to or not affect me. The other thing they talked about was breaking the street date, as you said, in the regions of Australia and Europe. Yep. And that I did want to comment on. That, as far as I know, is the first time that a company has more or less like signed off on it on breaking the street date.
Yep. Yeah, I don't remember or recall in the history of my pre-order days of gaming ever having a street date broken and be okayed and validated by the publisher ever.
Mm-hmm. And that's directly affected by the coronavirus. That's something that we didn't talk about in that episode because it hadn't happened yet. Right. But it is one of those things that, hey, the coronavirus. We do have coronavirus related news, but it's specific in the way that it's affecting gaming in a way that we've never seen, a completely unprecedented way of a game being like, yeah, we're just going to break the street date. Get these games to our people when you can, and if that's early, that's fine. It seems to be their attitude towards it.
And that's where I have hope for like Best Buy and Walmart, because those retailers don't give a crap about street dates. Walmart leaks crap all the time, puts stuff out on the shelf because the employee doesn't really know what's going on. And it's only recently they started linking the date into the register. So when the customer sees it on the shelf, they take it to go pay for it, and the register won't let them. Like, that's how they enforce street dates in retailers. So if that's gone, then who knows when we could see a copy tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, like with the other retailers that aren't Amazon, because they're brick and mortar, you can just walk in and go get them. I don't recommend going to a brick and mortar store for something like a video game right now, because we're supposed to be staying home and social distancing. But if you really wanted to try, I suspect that those retailers are going to, again, bypass street date and just get them on the shelf as soon as they receive them, or ship the orders out early. I have a backup pre-order through Best Buy, as I mentioned earlier, so I will get 2 physical copies. And because of what you mentioned with Amazon's sale, I will return one of the 2 to to Best Buy, to get my money back from Best Buy, and then I'll keep the other one. Yeah. So that's my backup plan. And my plan C is to buy it digitally to make sure I play the game on release date. And if I buy it digitally, then I buy 2 copies.
Yeah, well, you took time off for it, so I can understand that. I didn't
it's
take time.
It's my single favorite video game of all time. I got to go big. You can't just sit on this.
I'm aware.
I need it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I would have probably taken the same measures if it were a Zelda game. You know what I mean? If it were a new Zelda game. So
I would too, for a Zelda game.
Yeah.
It's the only other type of game that I would do this for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. There was another piece of news that you wanted to talk about before we move on to our next segment.
Yeah. Nintendo reportedly planning Mario remasters for Switch to celebrate Mario's 35th anniversary.
That's awesome.
And this went all over the internet. It was kind of confirmed by Eurogamer, but what I'm reading is Adam Bankhurst over at IGN. He says, quote, "In honor of Super Mario Bros. 35th anniversary, Nintendo is said to be getting ready a big celebration that will include, quote, plans to re-release most of Mario's 35-year back catalog, this year. As reported by VGC, I don't know what, Video Games Chronicle, multiple sources have confirmed that this news that also states a new installment in the Paper Mario series will be arriving on Nintendo Switch in 2020. These games are set to be revealed alongside new details on both the Super Nintendo World theme park and the animated Super Mario movie projects Nintendo was working on Universal with. So
that's huge. That's kind of what we were predicting with a Mario release, but that's way more Mario than I thought we'd ever get. So that's crazy.
Yep, and it goes on to continue saying, Eurogamer also states that new Paper Mario is in fact in the works, and that a deluxe edition of the Wii U's Super Mario 3D World will arrive on Switch with, quote, an array of new levels. Gamatsu has also heard similar reports and adds that Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Sunshine will also be brought to the Switch. So if these reports are accurate, and assuming the games will not be delayed due to COVID-19, Nintendo Switch owners will be able to look forward to the following Mario titles in 2020. That's this year. Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario Galaxy, Super Mario 3D World, a brand new Paper Mario game, and other, quote, 3D Mario titles that are unannounced. So that could be Mario Galaxy 2. I don't know what other 3D Mario games there are, but maybe 3D Land from the 3DS being moved over.
That's
but
so many games. That's like, I'm going to be paying close attention to my Nintendo stock, because it might be a good time to cash in after all that gets announced. I
read that and I just got so excited. I cannot even think about if they bring Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine and do any sort of refresh, up-res, higher, better graphics, and smooth out the platforming and make it feel like not so dated, I'll lose my mind. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah, that's a lot of Mario. I mean, that's a lot for 1 year. Now, just again, for the record, everybody, this is not officially confirmed. Right. But there are multiple sources corroborating it for now. So we'll see if it's all a big hoax, but it sounds like there's a high probability of it being an announcement soon, which makes me hopeful there's going to be a Direct soon too. So
yeah, it's Super Mario Direct for 35 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't realize it was the 35th anniversary of Mario. And then I was like, oh yeah, 1985, 2020. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yep. All of this is more substantiated than the Smash Bros. Grinch leak. Just saying.
Hey, listen, the Grinch leak was a brilliant hoax. It was a well-executed, well-designed, brilliant hoax. And I am proud to have fallen for it.
You did. You were all in.
I was all in. All right. I just want Isaac and Smash, okay? And if the ARMS character they choose... Oh, did we announce that? Did we talk about that real quick?
Oh, we haven't. We haven't actually talked about it on the show.
Yeah. Nintendo, that is the last thing we'll talk about, is Nintendo confirmed that the 6th DLC character, the first one for DLC Pack 2, will be a character from ARMS, but they haven't confirmed which character yet. But as much as I don't really care for this character, I thought there were more fun characters in ARMS, but if it is Springman, which would be a shoo-in, that would be notable only because it would be the first time a character went from a assist trophy to a playable character in the same game.
Yeah.
And that would give hope for the likes of Isaac, Skull Kid, Shovel Knight. There's a whole bunch of Waluigi. There's a whole bunch of assist trophies that are in the game currently that may and could be promoted. And that's one of the few barriers we haven't seen broken yet by Nintendo. So that would be cool. All right, that's all we have for news today. So that brings us to our next segment, which is
doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Ooh, man, that
sounded like commit.
That sounded
you just gotta
better.
commit. You gotta
It sounded,
try
but who knows over the internet.
How was the last episode? You edited it.
I haven't edited it yet. Okay. But at the time of this recording, I haven't edited it yet. Right. So we'll see. It's going to be way worse. Last time was bad.
So this is our second episode recording remotely for 80-Bit Podsmash. We did the bonus episode, but we didn't sing. So we don't really know the kinks yet.
Yeah. So
you edit last one.
We'll see.
Got it.
Anyways, Favorite Things is a segment where we like to update you on our thing that we've found or discovered this week that we're excited about, in hopes that you might find your next favorite thing. Could be deep, could be shallow, could be fun, could be profound, could be, I don't know, cuddly or delicious. Other adjectives. It could be any adjective you want it to be. So what's your favorite thing?
My favorite thing was celebrating my wife's birthday over the weekend. I got my 4-year-old to be super excited, who's been going to preschool, and he can now make stuff out of construction paper, glue, stuff. So because we're quarantined and we can't go out anywhere to celebrate my wife's birthday, I decided to, on Saturday, the day before, get with my 4-year-old. I hyped it up. I was like, we're going to have a super secret project. It's going to be between you and me. You can't tell anyone. Mommy cannot know. He was all into it. He's like, yeah, okay. So we come down to the basement and we cut little triangle flags out of construction paper. And I had 4 flags, and I asked him to draw with his marker something he likes to do with Mommy on each of the flags. So one of them had them baking a cake together, one of them had them gardening together, and then another one had us all 4 outside, just in a park. And then the 4th one, he wanted to draw us all building crafts at the kitchen table. So we had these 4 drawings across these 4 flags, and then I put toilet paper between each flag and made a streamer that we hung up in the dining room where we eat that said happy birthday. And I used the toilet paper because of coronavirus and the quarantine.
I was going to say, a very irresponsible use of toilet paper during a global shortage.
Millions of dollars worth of toilet paper by the 8 sheets that I used.
She should know it's valuable then.
It really shows us how self-sacrificial we are for her. So I did that.
Awesome. That's adorable.
She loved it. He loved it. My 4-year-old, he's just ecstatic about the whole thing. So we had a great day celebrating with her. We ordered takeout Thai, and we had a glass of, it was 80 some degrees, and we were able to sit outside at night after we put the kids to bed, share a bottle of wine with Thai food, and just talk for an hour and a half about life. And it was awesome. So that's my favorite thing.
Great. Very good. My favorite thing is, I'll say my second favorite thing is the Borderlands DLC Gun Love and Tentacles.
Yeah.
Was exceptional. It was very good. The gear is good. The story was good. The Lovecraft-inspired feel of it was good. And they've just been adding a lot of improvements to the game. It's shaping up. It's not quite there yet, but it's starting to shape up, which is nice. But my favorite thing is I discovered an interesting flavor combination for foods that I had never really considered before. And I'll cut to the chase. I put Taco Bell hot sauce, not Diablo, but fire. I put Taco Bell fire sauce on Domino's pizza, and it was good. I came to this because my wife and I wanted to get pizza, but I was just craving pizza. So it was specifically I wanted pizza. I was willing to go with Chinese food, but we couldn't get a hold this Chinese food place that's local to us has a single phone line and no hold. So you either call in and get a busy signal, or so you have to keep calling over and over again. And during during the pandemic, apparently people are not. People are just constantly calling in. Anyway, so I couldn't get hold of Chinese, so I was like, let's go ahead and get pizza. So I got pizza. I had a bunch of Taco Bell sauce, but like when I was ordering it, I want to try something a little different, but I wasn't willing to get the like a different kind of crust. And I wasn't willing to really try different toppings, but I saw they had hot sauce as a topping, and that got me thinking. I was like, I don't want to waste a topping on hot sauce when I have some at home, but I was like, I've never considered hot sauce on pizza. So I have a whole bunch of hot sauces at home, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go with something that's not so crazy overwhelmingly flavor-wise, because I don't want to overwhelm the flavor of the pizza. So I was like, I've got this fire sauce, and I tried it, and it was perfect. It was just enough, like, spicy to give the pizza a little kick, but the flavor did not overwhelm the pizza. And the reason why I say it was perfect was because I tried it with the one packet of Diablo sauce, and the Diablo sauce was too much. Not too spicy, but it just completely stunned the entire flavor of the pizza out of it.
Interesting.
But the fire sauce added just enough flavor to be interesting while still getting the pepperoni and the cheese and the marinara sauce and the garlic from the crust. So I was like, Domino's pizza, I did it with pepperoni and onions and then put some fire sauce on my slices, and it was divine. So new thing for you to try.
What are your toppings that you don't want to waste a topping on hot sauce to replace?
Pepperoni for one, and then I really wanted onions on it. I don't know why, but I was just craving onions. So, although in hindsight, the onions did kind of lose the onion flavor from the hot sauce. So maybe I'll try it. I'd be willing to try it with a different topping, a different second topping, I should say.
So onions, pepperoni, and that's it. Just two.
It was a 2-topping pizza. It was the $5.99 deal.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Although I'm not a huge, crazy, tons of toppings kind of. I will eat a pizza with lots of toppings, but I'm like 2 to 3 is the right number of toppings for me, because too much and you just have too much going on. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm like a give me like, I'm happy with 2. I'm happy with 1. I'm happy with just a pepperoni pizza. You know, but 3 is like my maximum of like, okay, this is the right number of toppings. Anything else, you just start to lose. Everything gets kind of jumbled up, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I actually didn't plan a DLC because I forgot. So I don't know if you have something or if you just want to skip it for tonight. We are 30 minutes in. We should probably cut it. But I really wanted to talk about hot sauce and pizza. So sorry for you DLC lovers. But we're going to skip DLC today, and we'll get death threats later. It's fine. I mean, it's not fine. You should never death threat anybody who disappoints you online. But, whatever. If you want to send us death threats, we'll just don't actually threaten us with death, or you'll have to answer to me. You'll have to answer to Penguin Man, and justice is black and white. So, there's that.
All right.
That's the closest you're going to get to DLC today, is Penguin Man's tagline. All right. So yeah, our main topic tonight is backwards compatibility, and
yay!
So we're gonna talk about it. You subtitled this "Looking Backwards," and I was thinking about something to do with Like I was going for the compatibility aspect and be like, are we compatible or something like that? You know what I mean? I couldn't think of something, but I had one earlier, but I can't remember what it was. But I was totally gonna lean into the whole compatibility thing. Anyways. So yeah, let's talk about it. Let's give the basic definition, what we're talking about. What is backwards compatibility?
Backwards compatibility. I don't have a Wikipedia definition, so this is just off my head. It's a current generation platform that plays games from a previous generation.
Yeah, so and that's how it applies to gaming. But backwards compatibility can apply to anything really, but specifically any electronic system. So like any electronic that plays or that can run the media of the previous generation, then that's backwards compatibility. So, for example, Blu-ray players were backwards compatible with DVDs because the format.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like you could stick a DVD into a Blu-ray player and it would play it. It wouldn't necessarily have all the up-res fancy features, but it could play it. And that's what's important. I saw an example on Wikipedia that was like FM radio could still use stereo audio because FM used mono. But like it could still play on stereo or something like that on stereos. Yeah. So it could be anything that can, use an older a legacy or a previous generational format. But with games, you're right. It's specifically this console can play the games from the previous console. It is a conversation around gaming that only really applies to console gaming because PCs don't have that problem.
Right.
PCs can play any game that can run on that operating system. So with those specs, as long as your PC can handle the game, it can play it, whether it's from 1995 or 2020. So
yeah, it's interesting. I actually had PC listed as a separate thing. We'll get into that when we go through the history of backwards compatibility for that. But
cool.
Yep.
Awesome. So before we get into breaking down like which consoles had it and why it's like what business decisions were made around backwards compatibility, I did want to talk about kind of the why. Why is backwards compatibility important? Why is it a conversation piece? Why do gamers care about it? Why do developers care about it or not care about it? Why is it an important thing?
It's important because when a new piece of gaming hardware comes out, there's usually a limited selection of software titles that launch with it. And you want to be able to justify the purchase of an expensive new gaming hardware piece, like a new console. And if there's only 2 games you can play on it, and a lot of people, like your friends, don't have the new console because the adoption rate's kind of slow, backwards compatibility matters because now you can go back to the previous generation of games you already bought with your friends who already have those games and continue playing and using your new hardware.
Yep.
That's one aspect.
That's one aspect of it. The other big aspect of it is the historicity, archival kind of nature of the cultural importance of games. I mean, this is a conversation that dates back millennia before video games were even a thing, but like, how does one generation preserve their stories and their cultural influence for future generations? And we're at a point in, back in the day, it was like, okay, well, like we can take these oral stories and we can write them down as best we can. Of course, that's an imperfect means of capturing things because things get lost over time and overtellings, and someone adds a detail here or forgets a detail there, and things change. So writing then became a more perfect. Okay, well, this is the written word. Like we can just copy. But again, then there was the problem of like we don't have the printing press, so people have to manually copy it. And again, that's subject to the same kind of forgetfulness or error. My favorite example of that is called the what's it called? It's called the Sinner's Bible. Yeah. And there's like one copy out there in the world, and it literally was a monk, because this is back in the day when the monks had to handwrite and copy it, and like a monk forgot a single word, but it's super important and it changes a lot. And that word happens to be the word not in the 10 Commandments for one of the commandments, and that is thou shalt not commit adultery. This copy of the Bible says thou shalt commit adultery.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that can affect people a little differently.
Oh, yeah. So it's called the Sinner's Bible. But again, copying, writing, hand copying is again a more imperfect method. But then came the printing press. And kind of from then on, there was this cultural, like humans began to kind of culturally value this idea of like being able to archive things in the kind of purest form. And being able to having a wide variety. The printing press also allowed not just for specificity, but also availability. Everyone should have the ability to consume this and experience this. And so that's kind of where we are now with backwards compatibility is, again, so, there's the question of like, oh, well, this game is meant to be played on this kind of TV, on this kind of console, and you can certainly pursue that. But then there's also the idea of, and that helps you with that specificity of like, oh, I can play Battletoads on an NES on a CRT tube if I go to your place and fire that up. Yep. Other than that, if I want to just, or if I say, hey, this game Battletoads is great for someone who doesn't, you would love this game for someone who doesn't have or the means or desire to get, all that stuff, that availability of having it available on a console somewhere, some means by which to play Battletoads is really important. So it brings up, this harkens back to our conversation about emulation as an archival means beyond backwards as sort of an alternative to backwards compatibility, kind of tied, they're kind of tied together. But I thought it was important to bring up that sort of like, it's becoming more and more of a conversation because gaming is becoming bigger. The library of games out there and their cultural significance has just grown over time. And think about like, again, oftentimes past works influence future works, so having the ability.
Oh yeah, you always want to go back and play like all the entries in the franchise. When you see God of War for PS4, you're like, oh, this is the 4th game. well, what about the first three?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, I got to subscribe to this PS Now and like go to this streaming thing and get God of War 3. Oh, and I want to play God of War 2. I got to go buy a PS2. What, can I get one? Like, that's backwards compatibility. It would be so awesome to just throw any of those discs into PS4 and play that.
Yeah.
And that's one aspect of it I never even thought about was the ridiculously never stop growing library of all video games all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first console that I'm aware of that had this whole idea of mainstream backwards compatibility was actually the PS2 natively.
Yeah.
There was an add-on to the Sega Genesis that allowed it to play Sega Master System titles, but that was an extra add-on that came later. It cost more money. It didn't work all the way. Not everything was compatible. But like native, right out of the box, just unbox the thing, hook it up. The PS2 played all of PlayStation 1.
Mm-hmm.
That's considered what, like generation 5 of all video game consoles ever. And so that's really late to the game. And at that point, video game libraries were still much smaller than today. Now it's ballooned into craziness. Like,
right. And when I'm a 50-year-old man and, my son is in his, high school, I don't know, I'm bad at math. So he'll probably be a 20 or something year old when I'm 50. So when he and his peers or people his age are like thinking about getting into designing games, maybe not there yet, but maybe studying, I want the games that inspire him to be games that like I want him to be as familiar, or at least somewhat familiar with Centipede as he is with, the games that are coming out now, the new BioShock, Borderlands, whatever. Like, I want them to have the ease, so that way, because inspiration can come from anywhere, you know what I mean? So having like people who just having it more widely available increases the chance that someone's going to come across a game and then have a genius moment of inspiration from that game. So having that library of games playable. So having new consoles kind of constantly have means by which to play old games as much as possible, I think just increases that availability and widespread access to that. So
it's very important. Like, that's why I have this physical. You just validated every reason I have for collecting games. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is I have this massive library of physical titles, because what you alluded to earlier was kind of the preservation or like historical aspect of what gaming was. So I have the CRT tube TV, and I have the original consoles, and I have their physical libraries here. So that's almost an argument against backwards compatibility, because I have everything that's native here already, but I love backwards compatibility because I would love to be able to take any of these discs off my shelf and go throw them into a modern console.
Yeah.
But my son, he's 4 years old, and he's obsessed with Mario right now. It is amazing. He wants to play it every single day, and he's playing the NES Mario. He's dabbled with Mario 2. He's dabbled in Mario 3. But he keeps going back to Mario 1, the original Mario, more than anything else. And in the back of my head, I'm like, yes, he's not playing Minecraft, and he's not playing Fortnite. He is playing Super Mario Brothers, and I can walk him back here and show him the cartridge, the original console, the original controller, hooked up to some old TV that he will never see anywhere else in his life, in his regular spheres of influence. But he plays it primarily on the Switch, and that goes kind of into our conversation later. But the Switch has like digital versions of these things, and so he can play it anywhere.
Exactly, and that's kind of
it's awesome.
And you're kind of dipping your toe in both worlds, where you have both the archival and the available, and again, not everyone, I would say everyone deserves to at least be able to play the games, and to some level, if you can afford it, you should be able to. If you can afford a modern console, you should be able to play the games licensed more or less by the people who own that console and that property, and ideally, you shouldn't have to buy the games twice. I think that's kind of the argument there is just like make it the availability of it being make it as few barriers of entry as possible. I should be able to more or less take my old disc, my old cartridge, whatever, and have a way to play it. That's kind of the ideal. Obviously, that's not the way it is right now, and so we'll break that down. So let's move on to that. Let's kind of skip why it's important for developers, because we kind of touched on that a little bit anyways. And let's go ahead and jump into the history of backwards compatibility, which consoles have it, which consoles don't, and what are some of the reasons and specifics regarding that.
So as we alluded to earlier, the first console that did this mainstream was Sony's PlayStation 2. It played PS1 games natively, right out of the box. And Sony has kind of continued a weird history with backwards compatibility. When the PlayStation 3 launched, it allowed PS2 games to be playable for a while.
Yep.
That proved to be too expensive and it drove the cost up, which we'll get to later. So they removed the PS2 hardware, replaced it with a software, and determined it was too buggy, it wasn't compatible enough, and just kind of removed all of it. But PlayStation 1 compatibility is still through every PS3. If you've got a PlayStation 3 of any type, there's like 3 different hardware variants, you can play PS1 games. Sony has kind of stopped all backwards compatibility with the PS4.
Yeah, and
Nintendo, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to zoom in on a couple pieces. The PS2, I read, one of the reasons why it actually sold so well initially was because of the fact that it had backwards compatibility. And it was kind of the first time many people experienced it. You know, many people who were PlayStation owners, I imagine, felt very vindicated in their loyalty to Sony, because Sony basically, you know, you buy the PS2 and, you know, there's a couple of games for it. And it's like, so when like the N64 came out, for example, it was like there was a few games and you couldn't play any other games, but those few games on it because it wasn't backwards compatible. Because with Nintendo, the physical discs were different, or not physical discs, the physical cartridges. Whereas with the PlayStation, it's like, oh, I can just play all my old PlayStation games. Boom. And that kind of solidified the PlayStation brand in a lot of ways. And what, you know, a lot of the conversations that are happening now about backwards compatibility, and like the way the Xbox is handling it, for example, that was all pioneered by PlayStation, being like, this is just the better version of it. This is just the upgraded version of it. You can still play all your games. It's just the new PlayStation. And that apparently drove sales up the wall. I
mean, you think about if you own a PlayStation 1 and you have a library of games with a memory card and controllers, the PS2 comes out, it's a DVD player for one, so that's new and exciting. And then it's everything your PS1 is. Your controllers work, your memory card works, your game works. It's like you're getting so much value without even having to buy any of the PS2 exclusive titles right off the gate. So it almost makes it a no-brainer solution, especially when DVD players were just as, if not more expensive than the console itself. So they struck that like crazy good value price point.
PS2 was just
in that moment
kind of a perfect release for its time. It was great. The other thing
it is the single most highest selling console of all time, but go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to zoom in on was the PS3, the means by which you talked about how it was for a limited time. It was actually backwards compatible with the 2. And I did a little bit of research to figure out why that was. And as people explained, they were like, it basically had 2 consoles in one. It had a whole infrastructure designed for, they called it, what did they call it? Something engine.
The Emotion Engine?
Emotion Engine, yep.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've talked about this before. Just for the layman, for the Eli 5, explain like I'm 5, it was for me, I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense. So it literally had an entire different architecture.
It had the PS2 motherboard in it.
Yeah,
that's it. So you put a PS2 game in, and it just routed all of its processing to the actual PlayStation 2 hardware installed inside the PS3.
The other thing I looked up was because for people like me who don't get it, who don't, because you may be thinking so much like PC, but like PC, I can just put a game in, it's just files, right? And then the PC reads the files. So why can't these consoles do that? I had to look it up, Eli 5. I found a good explanation for it on Reddit, actually. And someone explained it way back when the PS3 came out, because people were asking about it and wanted it explained. And they explained it very simply in regards to, it all has to do with the processor. And this is across the board. Every PC, the processor is different slightly. Now, PCs have created a universal architecture so that every processor has to adhere to this. But consoles don't. And so when the PS3 came out, it had a brand new spanking processor, and
it's called the Cell processor, and 7 cores.
Right. And so each processor requires a different set of instructions in order for it to be told how to run things. So if you literally take an Xbox game and try to run it on PS3, it's a different processor. So it's going to be like, I don't know what to do. It literally doesn't know what to do. That's why emulation, that's what emulation does. Emulation, it says, it tricks the processor into receiving a set of instructions that it recognizes. So that's kind of basically how it works.
The architecture you're referring to, the PC one, is the x86. That's what the current PS4 and Xbox One use, and that was the ridiculously developer-friendly move that Sony and Microsoft made.
Because you can imagine trying to make, now that you understand that like processors and their architecture is how this all works, you may be able to sympathize a little bit with developers being like, I don't want to make games for 3 different architectures.
Yeah, they have to port the files over and recompile everything and test for compatibility. And each of those processors have different frequencies, different I/O bus situation with memory registers and sizes, and completely proprietary hardware across the board. Yep.
So you've explained that for years and explained it like that, but I never really understood. I mean, you didn't explain it like that. I'm sorry, but you've said the words, like you've said the terms. It's got a different architecture. It's got a different architecture. It couldn't run on the architecture, and I never really got it until I looked it up, and then I'm like, oh, processor. I know what a processor is. I'm a computer science person. I know processors. That makes sense. Yeah. So, anyways, cool. Let's move on. I think Sony's kind of the perfect example to see how they've kind of flip-flopped over the years on backwards compatibility. So looking all that up.
We can go into Nintendo.
Yep.
So Nintendo was the last console to switch to CDs. So we saw the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the N64. I'm just going to stay American. There's some Japanese Famicom stuff, but each of those consoles had different hardware, both in the console itself and in the cartridges.
Yeah.
So
you literally couldn't take a Game Boy game and put it in your N64 because it literally would not fit. It would not slot anywhere. It just that was how they answered that's how they didn't answer backwards compatibility. You know what I mean? Like that's the problem they created for themselves, was literally having the game physically be different.
Oddly enough, in their portable space, the Game Boy Color was backwards compatible.
Yeah,
the Game Boy Advance was backwards compatible. And then the DS came out with a Game Boy slot that only played Game Boy Advance slots.
Crazy.
It was a slot B on the bottom. So the DS had both the cart for the DS games and the Game Boy Advance slot on the bottom.
Nintendo. That's such a Nintendo thing.
Right? And then the 3DS came out, and it's backwards compatible with DS and 3DS. And then the GameCube was there, and it was definitely not backwards compatible.
That was the first one with discs, and they were tiny discs.
Yep. So when the Wii came out, it was backwards compatible with GameCube, and even had 4 GameCube controller ports and 2 memory card ports. It had, and I found out later when I learned things as an adult, that the Wii hardware was a slightly upgraded GameCube.
Oh,
that's
interesting.
It.
Crazy.
So that's why it was so easy for the backwards compatibility to work. And then the Wii U came out, and they dropped GameCube backwards compatibility and preserved Wii backwards compatibility.
Yep.
So Nintendo also has a weird track record. The Switch is now out, and there's no backwards compatibility at all, except for
because they're back to
Nintendo and Super Nintendo. Right. They're back to carts that are tiny little cartridges that are proprietary for just the Switch. So, Nintendo's experimented in a myriad of ways with backwards compatibility, like Sony did with PSN or PS Now. Nintendo has the Virtual Console service. So on the Wii, it was the first internet-connected box where you could go and download libraries of Super Nintendo, N64 games that would run. And then that continued through the 3DS and the DSi. I'm sorry, the DSi came first, then the 3DS, the Wii U. They all had this whole virtual console where you had to, what you said is a bad thing, you had to rebuy everything. So if you had the physical game on your shelf, too bad. You had to buy it again. In each console, you had to buy it for that console. So you couldn't even buy it once and it just work on all of your stuff.
Follow you around,
It was so maddening. Like I had a Wii, a 3DS, a Wii U, and a DSi, and I wanted to play Mario. I had to buy it 4 times.
Oh my gosh.
To play it on all those consoles. I didn't, because that's maddening. But I would have had to if I needed to. So Nintendo has a weird history of backwards compatibility. They came out with those classic consoles that are like USB, HDMI. That's kind of fun to go back and play. They packed all those games in. So I was super hyped about those when those came out. I still have them and love them. I think that's where we are with Nintendo.
Yep.
The 3DS is still their newest.
Yeah, they're kind of the Netflix for games solution, if you will, with you called it Virtual Console, but it's technically not Virtual Console anymore. But this whole idea of having a
Switch Online service.
Yeah, having a Switch Online service where you can, like, all the games are from the NES, and they're now dipping their toe in SNES era. So they're not super, you don't have to like download them to your Switch, but you just fire up the Switch app or the Switch Online app and then can play the games. So it's like another twist on the same solution of just a digital version of the game.
Yeah.
But it's still the same idea, but it's slightly different. But
and
so Microsoft.
Microsoft. So the original Xbox is called that because it was supposed to be a DirectX console, which DirectX is the PC architecture's way of rendering graphics. Like that's the graphics engine was DirectX. It was very Microsoft proprietary. They decided to spin that off and make it a console, so it was very close to PC architecture. Then the Xbox 360 came out, same deal, and it did have some backwards compatibility, but it was limited.
Was it really? I don't remember it being limited.
It didn't play everything.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And it had a weird solution for Xbox Live, because I remember playing Halo 2 on the 360 for more than anything else. Like I bought a 360, I was so hyped about it that all I did was play Halo 2. And I was like, why did I even buy this thing? Anyway,
the
Xbox
Halo 2,
One came out.
I'm blanking. Halo 2 came out for the original Xbox.
It did.
That's right.
Yeah.
It did. Okay. Yep. Sorry. That's why I was like, oh, that's what's important about that context.
Yeah. And then the Xbox One came out, and they actually kicked off with the message of, we don't want any backwards compatibility whatsoever. And there's a quote. It's kind of the business marketing question we're going to talk to later, but I'll quote it now. And because only a small percentage of customers play older games, 5%, backwards compatibility is not a scenario worth Microsoft's investment and development costs.
Oh my
gosh. That
was
a quote from one of
so
Microsoft's leaders. Yeah. Boy, have they turned that ship around.
Oh, yeah.
Once Phil Spencer got in, and now they are the best console solution for backwards compatibility.
100%.
They go all the way back to the original Xbox library, and they've enhanced things for free. You can play Xbox 360 titles at 4K with improved frame rates. If you own the disc, throw it in the game, and it will download the stuff from the internet, and it will install it, and you can play it using the disc kind of as a key. Yeah, all Microsoft Xbox stuff works in the Xbox One. And the reason why
we might have to do some math on this, but I would be willing to say that because the SX has announced they will be 100% backwards compatible with everything from all of the Xboxes, it may be the single most backwards compatible console ever built, because it will have 3 generations worth of backwards compatibility, and I don't think any other game console has done that yet. We've seen.
I don't want to completely misspeak. Not every Xbox 360 game is compatible, and not every original Xbox game is compatible. There's a list online. There's hundreds of stuff. Pretty much like the most popular things you want to play will work, but it's not 100%. So it's not
some random game you got for Christmas may not play on it. But yeah. Interesting, but still, that's still pretty solid.
It's definitely the most.
It's closest. It's kind of closest to the ideal there. And so did you want to talk about PC real quick? Yeah.
So PC is actually the most backwards compatible thing in existence, but it's not a console. It's a PC. Yeah. So saying Microsoft Xbox One is the Series X will be the most backwards compatible console is not not wrong.
Incorrect.
So,
right.
Yeah. With PC,
you may if I were to say gaming machine, that would be wrong because the PC is the
exactly.
Most, yeah.
Yep. With PC, you can go to GOG, Good Old Games. You can go to Green Man Gaming. You can go all over the website, internets. Even Steam has a huge library of stuff dating all the way back to the 70s and 80s and play anything that has come out. They have these games wrapped in their own emulators. So like DOSBox is a thing. If you want to play a DOS game, you buy it online. You get the official license. It's not a pirated thing. It's not illegal. You download it, install it. When you double click the executable, it actually fires up a DOS emulator and it will run the game as if it were installed on a 1980s Windows DOS computer, and it'll play. So you actually have like the most backwards compatible thing. If it ever came out on a PC in existence, you can probably play it now.
Right. Not only that, but most, I wouldn't say all, but very many, like with the current Windows 10 system, most of your old discs of games, if you have a shelf full of just old discs of games, you can probably run them. You could probably even run floppies if you connected a floppy disk into a disk drive. But Windows has done a pretty good job of like being able to kind of fire off that old architecture required to run games currently. And if it can't, I guarantee you can probably find a patch online that will allow it to run. I remember having to download patches for Final Fantasy VII actually for my PC copy of Final Fantasy VII. Having to download a patch to get the Chocobo races working, And as much as
nice.
as much as you might like roll your eyes about that and be like, oh, PC gaming, at the same time, that's also kind of what makes a PC powerful, because you can't even run Final Fantasy VII's discs on your PS4.
That's true.
Take that. But again, yeah, I have heard that argument from PC gamers being like, why would you ever, because of the backwards compatibility powers of a PC, why would you ever get a console? So, and it's a hard argument to refute. It is probably one of the greatest check marks in the box of PC gaming, in the pros of PC gaming. So
yeah, you can play everything.
Yeah. Like I said, floppy disks, old CDs, you can probably get them working on your PC with a little bit of elbow grease, or fire and forget in some cases. So and then like you said, there's also digital solutions for almost everything with good old games. And even Steam's library is pretty significant when it comes to games from the aughts and stuff like that. So
yeah, Good Old Games is awesome. I've talked about them before in the show, but apparently there's a lot of old games out there that companies who have developed them dissolve, and like the people just move on to other projects, but the IP is kind of unmaintained. No one really knows who owns it or the rights to it. They just know it's protected, so they can't like use it. So Good Old Games goes out and chases down the people and chases out the trademarks, the copyrights, and like figures out, works with lawyers and works with companies, who company bought out who, which employees developed this that owns the rights to that. And like they figure that whole web out, and they rebuy the rights to the game and they repackage it all. They try to find digital scans of the manuals and the box art, and they give it all to you when you buy it digitally, and soundtracks and stuff. It's awesome. And it like supports this whole idea of archiving old games, and it persists that whole intellectual property forward in a way that new people can enjoy. It's fantastic. I love Good Old Games.
Well, cool. Let's move on and talk about the kind of business decisions and marketing sense, marketing logic, if you will, around backwards compatibility, how it's changed over the years, and kind of why companies have approached it in various ways, and why they've changed over the years.
It's easy for us as consumers, as gamers, people who buy this stuff, to want to be like, backwards compatibility is a no-brainer. It's obviously a win for everyone. Why doesn't everyone want this? Like, why don't we get it? Why didn't PS4 play everything PlayStation? Why didn't Xbox One out of the box play everything Xbox? Why doesn't the Nintendo Switch have an adapter that lets me put N64, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo cartridges in? Like, why not, right? And it makes, quote, a lot. I hear this everywhere, all over the internet, in my spheres of influence, just water cooler talk at work. This was back at school when I was still going to college and high school. Like, everyone's just like, yeah, backwards compatibility, why doesn't it exist everywhere? It should just be done. It doesn't always make business sense. And so I did a little bit of research and trying to figure out, like, why isn't everything backwards compatible? And that's why I quoted Xbox earlier, that quote where he says, and it sounds like he completely missed the mark when he was talking about how only 5% of customers play older games. That was a metric that was done after some market research. And when you look at the research and development of putting out a new console with new games, working with modern developers, and you think, if I spend extra money to get a whole team of people together to run through this entire library of old games and make those work for only a 5% increase in market share with this console or like player base, it's not worth it. It costs a lot of money to make this stuff work. So that's why I quoted Microsoft. But also with Sony and the PS3, I want to quote, this website is Engadget. They're a modern website, but this article is old. It's actually from 2007, written by Andrew Yoon. He says this, quote, "So the 40 gigabyte PS3 is losing backwards compatibility with PS2 games. Is that a big deal? You voted, but let's hear what the analysts have to say. From a business perspective, it makes sense for Sony to remove the feature. Cost is hard to gauge, probably $30 to $50 per unit. Wedbush Morgan Securities' Michael Pachter told Game Daily. A significant savings when one considers the thousands of systems Sony must sell. Will the lack of PS2 support affect PS3 sales? Quote, I thought lack of backwards compatibility would hurt the Xbox 360, but it really didn't. However, NPD analysts Anita Frazier has some data that might concern nearly, quote, 70% said backwards compatibility was an important feature to them. And again, that harkens back to the PS2, right? So regardless, when it comes down to the choice between backwards compatibility and saving $100, the choice will be clear for most consumers. Colin Sebastian, an analyst at Lazard Capital Markets, noted, it appears that pricing is becoming more of a priority, which makes sense given where the PS3 is selling in terms of market share. I don't believe removing backwards compatibility is a huge deal, considering most people who want to play PS2 games continue to do so on their PS2s. That's a lot to unpack. So
it is.
The PS2
Sorry, go ahead.
was sold ridiculously well. It was crazy. It's still the most single top selling console of all time. So that's the context here. PS3 came out at $600. It was insane. There was a cheaper version. I think it was $500, but the Xbox 360 came out cheaper and it was eating its lunch. The PS3 was not supported very well by developers. And so Sony was trying to fix this. Like, what can we do to save costs, to drive the cost down, to make this PS3 something somebody wants? And the idea of backwards compatibility did not make sense because it cost $30 to $50 more per unit. And when you sell millions of units, that's a lot of money.
It is. I hear all that, and I find it's both, it's short-sighted, and it's both in the context of, it's short-sighted from the developer standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, and it's incredibly short-sighted from even the gamer's standpoint. And the reason I bring it up is, to me, I'm getting, like, when you're explaining all that and, like, quoting these people, it reminded me of Gearbox's excuse for why they're not adding new Vault Hunters to Borderlands 3. And their excuse was, well, because we ran metrics and found that people weren't playing other Vault Hunters. They picked a main and they stuck with it without looking at the big picture and asking, well, why do people do that? It's not because of a lack of a desire. It's because your campaign is super long. It takes forever to level characters. Like, they never got that. They still to this day don't understand, like, never looked at the big picture, never asked why. And I mean, to me, the simple, like, when you kept saying it costs $30 to $50 more to, per console to make it backwards compatible, in my mind, I kept saying it costs $25 to $40 more to buy a new version of a game for the PS4 that I already bought on the PS3. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the answer to backwards compatibility, or the lack thereof, I should say, on a lot of these consoles was, well, we still clearly can identify the fact that people want to play old games, but they can't run on this game. So let's just remaster it and re-release it and charge full price for it. And so again, I can't stop thinking.
And that's a win-win for developers, for publishers. Not
it is. It's incredibly win-win
for everyone else. Yeah,
I was gonna say, except for the consumer, it's incredibly anti-consumer. And if I were to sit down, if I'm thinking clearly, and again, I'm thinking clearly because I look in hindsight, who knows what decision I would make in any given moment. But if I were thinking clearly and thought to myself, you know what, I would pay an extra $100 for a console, knowing that I could play all of the games from the previous consoles on it and not have to spend money on the new versions of those games. Like, it is actually it ends up being a long-term cost saving mechanism for consumers. And that needs to be marketed better. And obviously history vindicates that point of view, because backwards compatibility has become the selling conversation piece. Xbox Series X is probably going to do better because of its backwards compatibility, and PlayStation could, I don't know if it will, but it could hurt. PlayStation has a strong thing going for it with its exclusives, let's be real. But again, all things being equal, it's like, that is something that someone's going to weigh at some point, is, do I want to have to rebuy this game? And honestly, that kind of thing just drives pirating more. To be honest, I can't imagine the amount of money developers have actually lost over the years because people have been like, you know what, they're putting obstacles in my way of just being able to play the games I've already bought, so I'm just going to pirate them because I want to play them, and my console broke years ago and I can't play them anymore. So, and the new console that I spent $300, $400 on can't play it. So, you know what? I'm just going to pirate it. Like, I would be willing to bet that if you could zoom out and see the big picture, it's cost them at least as much money as it has earned them when it comes to remastering and re-releasing games. It's probably a bit of a zero-sum.
You look at all of that over the course of a console lifecycle, and you might end up at the end of it ahead if you would have just invested in backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
The hardest sale point and the most important time of a console's life cycle as far as sales, install base, and winning a generation is the launch.
Yeah.
And that's why PS3 lost, because it was $100 more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So if you'd have tacked on an additional $100 to PS3 to make it fully compatible, $700 for a console, no one would have bought it. Without an install base, no one's going to develop games for your console. So you don't get any developer income. You get no publisher income. You get nothing. You have no ties.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're marketing a new console from Sony or Microsoft's perspective, you have to work with developers, you have to work with publishers, and the consumers are kind of the person who matters the least. Yeah. Kind of. It's a weird way of looking at like how business works. So you have to compete at launch with a price point that is appealing to consumers, because that's what it gives you your install base.
Yeah.
So you can sell more games on your console. And backwards compatibility takes the back burner to that conversation, because they're looking at the numbers and they're saying, okay, this many people actually care about backwards compatibility. We can cater to them later. For now, what matters is we're out the gate at a cheaper price that appeals to more people with other stuff to get that install base out. That's how it's been in the past. Like that's how it's been in history of launching new consoles. And you talked about how it's anti-consumer. That what you mentioned, that piracy. I never thought about this until you said it. It kind of clicked in my head. That idea of piracy hurts developers more than anything.
Yeah.
Publishers secondarily, and the hardware manufacturers tertiarily. So Sony and Microsoft, they don't lose crap on piracy. They don't give a crap. Publishers lose a little bit of money because they lose sales of their game. Developers really hurt it. It hurts them more because their bonuses are based on sales and reviews, and both the reviews are affected by leaks, people pirating games before they come out, and then the actual like distribution of the game and physical sales of their copies, whether it's digital or physical, are then ruined by piracy. So that's the anti-developer side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So backwards compatibility coming from it with a Sony Microsoft perspective, they don't care, because backwards compatibility doesn't affect them. It only affects consumers and developers, which are farther down the chain. They're competing at the higher level. So,
right, but then again, it then ends up indirectly affecting them, because if you have developers who are like, well, you don't care about this thing, that because again, backwards compatibility ends up being both a pro consumer and pro developer thing. And so, and I mean, you're seeing that with like the decisions that Sony and Microsoft are making. That's the word that keeps coming up, is we want to make decisions that are pro developer. The conversation between Epic Games and Steam, it's all about what benefits the developers. Like, because at the end of the day, we've seen the strength of that. We've seen the strength in investing in developers is the PS4 is the ultimate culmination of that, is that drove sales, because people wanted to make games for the PS4 because of what they could do. And therefore they had strong exclusive lineup. That is at least as important as consumer focus going forward, is who wants to make games for your device. And so that's going to be a big deal. So therefore, if backwards compatibility is a pro developer thing as well, I think that's, again, as you were talking about, that's probably part of the reason why we've seen such a change and a 180 in these companies investing and researching in it. And that's what I was trying to say, is like, technology solutions are going to be the way forward. Finding more cheap, affordable ways to do it, utilizing things like the cloud, utilizing things like digital emulation that are cheap, essentially just applications you can build into the console to run when it detects a disk has been inserted. Like, those kind of solutions are totally within the realm of possibility. May take a while to research and get them working, but ultimately could save you in the long run, when you don't have to actually include an entire physical architecture to run old games.
Exactly. And that takes the cost out of the hardware, because it's a technology solution outside the box itself. And then it allows the pro developer move of, oh, hey, Sucker Punch, people want to play Infamous, so they can play it on PS Now, which is streamed to the cloud. You get the money, you get a cut, because you want to put your game on PlayStation Now. You get, there's an exchange, there's a business exchange, people make money. That's, Nintendo, they hold all their cards to their chest, but there's Capcom games, there's Square Enix games, there's Taito, and there's a myriad of different Konami. They all have to make deals on your Nintendo Switch. When you fire up Castlevania, that's a Konami game. Konami's making money on that. There's a deal that happens. But all that stuff is not tied to the planning, execution, and sale of the console itself, other the marketing aspect. And this is what Microsoft did. They're taking the ridiculously consumer approach because their strategy is to increase this install base. And they're doing that with Game Pass too. Here's this Netflix gaming subscription. First party titles will be there day and date. Here's all this backwards compatibility. Everything works. Super consumer friendly. So when the next system comes out, the Xbox Series X, everyone's like jazzed to go get that because they already have Game Pass. Everything works. It actually runs and looks better on the new console. And that increases that install base.
Mm-hmm.
That's the value. That's what they can take to a publisher and say, hey, EA, our Xbox Series X, or our entire platform has this many millions of players. If you put a game on our system, you're going to make this much money.
Yeah.
So come to us.
Yeah.
They're actually more appealing to the publishers, which can then... So Sony's taken the opposite angle. So if you look at a whole like track record, developers make games for publishers. Publishers sell the games to the hardware manufacturers to run on the consoles. The other direction that Sony's taking is pro developer to increase and enable developers to use their hardware and make the best games possible on PlayStation because they'll sell the consumer base is the reward for Sony. The developers putting games on Microsoft is the reward for Xbox.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. It's
Yeah,
like
it
two
does.
different approaches. And when you
It's
throw
two different,
backwards
exactly, two different paths that like
Yeah.
only time will tell which one is the more successful path.
And we alluded to all of this in our PS5, Xbox Series X bonus episode, so you guys can go hit that up if you want to hear it. We go into more detail about those things. But all of that conversation, when you throw backwards compatibility in, it's a very hard sell to the hardware manufacturers. It's an easy sell to the consumers, hard sell to the hardware. Developers and publishers are mixed up, and so that's why we don't see it. That's why the business marketing. I wanted to shed a light on that because a lot of people overlook it when they're just disappointed. Like I'm disappointed that PlayStation hasn't come out and said we're going to play every disc that has a PlayStation name on it. You can play it, like,
right? And that's
I'm
kind of
ready
the
to
ideal.
open.
That's like the ideal version of it, where it's like I don't have to buy the game twice. My shelf, I can just, oh my gosh, put it in the new console. That's like the number one goal for backwards compatibility.
Yep.
All the workarounds that we've talked about, whether it's online streaming, whether it's some kind of digital version, whether it's like a classic console that you have to buy again, or even like a remaster, all of those are compromises, if you will. And each individual consumer has to kind of determine for themselves what that level of compromise is. Am I going to go ahead and just buy the remaster, the up-res version of it? I like immediately think about like The Last of Us, which came out, the original one came out near the end of the PlayStation cycle, and the remaster came out in a relatively short time afterwards. I feel for the people who had to buy it twice.
I did.
Yeah, exactly. So like, but again, you have to kind of make that decision for yourself. But again, I kind of lean towards positive thinking in regards to like, I feel like a streaming solution is a pretty good middle ground because yes, I'm paying a monthly subscription for it, but I pay a monthly subscription for Netflix for movies that I could theoretically already have purchased. You know what I mean? So it's like, there is some sort of like, I'm paying for a service and that service allows me to play old games on my new hardware. That seems a little bit more like a compromise that I can get behind as a consumer and be like, you know what, that's fair. If I'm willing to pay the monthly subscription for it, that's fair. That's why I feel like Xbox is really killing it in that regard because they have both solutions in place. The subscription model for Game Pass and the hardware backwards compatibility with playing all the games. They're really trying to cover their bases, and I have a lot of respect for that as a consumer. From if I take off my consumer hat and put on my developer hat, that I'm not a developer, but I can think like one. I think both approaches still, from a developer standpoint, have validity because developers should want to say, hey, like, they should be paying attention to the install base. You know what I mean? And so the more people, if a hardware manufacturer is making consumer-friendly choices, that just means that the potential install base is higher and therefore more attractive to developers as well. So, but we'll just, like you said, like we've said, we'll see which choice is vindicated in the long run. Maybe they'll both be wildly successful and it'll be a historical moment for people to say, look back on and be like, oh, both of these approaches are equally valid and for different reasons. And so you should consider them both, ideally. Because again, we should, in a perfect world, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo would be saying, what's the best choice for both developers and consumers, and be designing their consoles accordingly.
Mm-hmm. And with the PlayStation 4 going into PS5, Sony's not changing their strategy. They're doing exactly the same thing that worked. And when you have the entire PS4 like trajectory of how successful they are, being as way overselling, way outsold. I mean, destroyed the latest generation by far. Sony won, like clear as day. PS4 won, and they didn't change their tactic. They're going right into PS5 with the same message, the same direction. Xbox, under the helm of Phil Spencer, that came to the Xbox One late, has changed Xbox's trajectory entirely from their very botched consumer developer horrible message of TV, Connect, Call of Duty, no disk drives, everything's online all the time. If you don't have internet connection, you're screwed. Copyright, no backwards compatibility. They had a horrible, like Microsoft just had a terrible launch of the Xbox One, and now they're entering their first chance at this new approach. So we'll see how it works out for them. It's definitely compelling. I mean, like I'm in. Like I kind of want one, but not enough to forsake the PS5 and its exclusives and the things that I love trophies about PlayStation. So
it'll be interesting to see how in time.
Well, looping all of that thought backwards. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to finish my thought. Nintendo has a fantastic, I think at first when they talked about the Nintendo Switch online service and its library of games that's like Netflix, they'll be rotating in and out and you have to have a paid subscription. One, it's $20 a year, which is super cheap. It's a third of the price of the other two. And two, the library they put on there is amazing and they continue to update it and they haven't removed anything yet. I think that is a fantastic backwards compatibility solution as far as availability goes. I'm missing N64, GameCube, and I'm not really missing Wii or Wii U yet. Maybe that'll come later. So I think Nintendo has that solution installed. It's in place. Microsoft has a very similar thing with Game Pass, like you said, but discs can go in and kind of download the online file, and that's where the enhancements come from. So that's why when you throw in like Red Dead Redemption 1 on your 360 into your Xbox One, it downloads Red Dead Redemption 1 from the server, and your disc is more or less a key. It doesn't really do anything with it. But Sony's kind of the oddball out. Like you have to do this PSN or PS Now subscription service that streams the games from the cloud, has high input lag. It's not great. The frame rate drops as far as quality of the video because it's rendered somewhere else and beamed across to you over the internet, and your controller inputs are beamed back to the server. It doesn't really work. So Sony's the oddball out when it comes to backwards compatibility now, but Microsoft and Nintendo have something going on. And I hope Sony learns from that.
Right. And, like we've seen, all of these companies have made good choices and bad choices over the years. So, and all of them have still been in business for the last, 20 to 30. So none of them are like standing to completely go extinct as a result of backwards compatibility choices. But It is really still, it's something that will always, at least in our generation of gamers, while we're still the primary purchasers of games, who knows what Gen Z will be like when they may care, they may not care about games that are 50 years old, whatever, but we do,
right?
And as long as we're still buying it, it's going to be a conversation piece going forward, and hopefully we'll be able to instill in the next generation that value of, hey, it's important for you to understand the cultural history of games, because for those of you who are aspiring game designers, we want you to be able to experience it. But we are way over time, or we're getting there, so let's go ahead and wrap up. Let us know, Pod Smashers, what your thoughts are on backwards compatibility. What consoles attract you because of backwards compatibility? Do you care about backwards compatibility? Do you what do you think has been done well, and what are your ideals of it, and what do you think are considerations that we haven't hit on? So you can reach out to us in all the places that Termite will tell you about.
If you also want to listen to our PS5 Xbox Series X discussion, about all the hardware and comparing and speculating about the next gen, you can find that episode as well as all of our episodes at 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bit podsmash.com. Episodes go live every Monday at midnight, so make sure you subscribe so that through your podcast app, so that you get the latest episodes immediately on midnight. When you wake up Monday morning, here we are with a brand new episode. So please do that. You can find links to Google Play, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all the platforms you would like. They're all at 80bitpodsmash.com. We stream every single Wednesday on Twitch. You can go to twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash. Either Penguin or myself, sometimes both. We try to stream different games every Wednesday evening, somewhere between 7 and 9. And you can find us there. You can also find us on social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have a subreddit. We have a Discord server. I'll talk about that in a second. But our social media tag is 80bit Podsmash. So add us, 80bit Podsmash. Discord, there's a link to our server with every one of the show notes that go into the podcast apps, as well as our social media Facebook posts. You can find the link to our Discord server, and you can live chat with us throughout the day, any day of the week. Just click that link and you're in. And that's where we're at. We're everywhere.
Great. Look out for us and find us. Next week, we will be celebrating the franchise Sonic the Hedgehog with an Everything Sonic episode. Usually we try to tie those to release, but there's no release coming out next week, so...
the movie might be coming.
The movie is maybe coming. The movie, yeah, who knows?
It's supposed to be released early because of coronavirus, so you're supposed to be able to stream it way earlier than it comes to disc or something.
We don't promise it'll be next week, but sometime soon.
Could be.
Anyways, we love the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, and we wanted to do an Everything episode on it. So we're not tying it to a release, but we are going to talk about it. So look forward to Everything Sonic. If you're a big Sonic fan, this is the episode to tune into. So yeah, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.